I am speaking to you from north of the border. Yes, last week I drove from Texas to Canada with 3 of my children. Thank God the drive went well. We drove almost 1,700 miles over 3 days. It was delightful. It was enjoyable. It was memorable. I'm glad it's over. And we had some fun stops along the way. And I'll tell you, I used to think that if you want to go on a summer little vacation, you bring your microphone with you so you could record the podcasts, but you get some cooler weather and visit some family. But if you don't have a car, it's just impossible. So I used to drive the car. It was like a necessary evil. You want the car for the summer, you got to drive it. I have some friends that they ship it. They don't want to do the drive. They ship it. But I'll tell you, this year, I thought it was such an enriching experience. I got to spend 3 days with some of my children, and there's no escaping. And you go stop in the hotel, and we went to a minor league baseball game, $6.50 per ticket. My daughter is 7. She was suffering every minute of the game because she doesn't like sports, doesn't like baseball. So she was crying. She wanted to leave. And my 2 boys, 10 and 12, Shlomo and Yitzi, they wanted to stay to the very end. So I was constantly balancing everyone's needs. But we were able to stand right by the bullpen, which was old school, like in the foul territory. And we ended up with 4 baseballs that the kids snagged. But we left after the 5th inning. But it was such a fun family experience. We did some other things along the way. And I was thinking, if the Almighty gives you this blessing, the opportunity to be able to go on trips with your children, it's something you should really do. Because all of us were busy, and we got our jobs and responsibilities. But this is something that your children will cherish for the rest of their lives, and it will deepen your relationship with them. I'm glad it's over, but it was a real delight. But now we're here. We're in Canada, north of the border, and we have a Parsha podcast. But I do have a quick announcement. If you recall, last year, over the summer, we had a Toronto get-together. It was a wonderful evening. We got together, and there was some food and drinks and refreshments and chit-chat, and I had a presentation. It was like 45 minutes or so, and it was so nice. My wife actually joined us, and there were like maybe 25 people or so that joined. And it was really a delightful and magical evening. So this year, we're doing it again. August 13th at 8 p.m. If you are in town, I would love if you can join us. Send me an email, rabbiwalby@gmail.com to RSVP, and I will send you the details. I hope you can make it. A Toronto Parsha podcast get-together August 13th at 8 p.m. The email address is rabbiwalby@gmail.com. We have a brand new book, the book of Devarim. This is the book that's the final one of the 5. The end of the Torah. Could you believe it? It's year 10 of the Parsha podcast, and we're nearing the end. We're in the stretch run. This book is known classically as the Mishnah Torah, the repetition of the Torah. Moshe is at the end of his life, and he wants to repeat the Torah before he passes. They say in the army, if you give an order, it's not enough to give the order once. You have to verify that it was done. You have to have some follow-up. You can't assume competence. Moshe is going to repeat the Torah to the nation. Now, it's interesting, the Ramban points out, much of the laws of the Torah are going to be repeated, but you won't find any repetition of any mitzvos pertaining to the priests. And the Ramban tells us that the reason why the priests, they don't need to have anything repeated to them. They are fastidious. They are scrupulous. They are meticulous in fulfilling the word of God. You tell it them once, and that is sufficient. In this book, the Ramban tells us there will be some mitzvos that we haven't seen before, either because they're only relevant to those who enter the land, or because they're so rare, like levirate marriages, false witnesses. These are mitzvahs that are so rare, Moshe waited to the end of the 40 years to convey this to the nation. And it starts off with two very mysterious, cryptic verses. And Rashi explains what's happening over here. You read the verses, and it ostensibly lists the locations in which Moshe was speaking. It's like the coordinates of the message. But it's not really a logical place. It starts off, these are the words that Moshe spoke to the entire nation of Israel, Be'ever HaYarden, on the other side of the Jordan, Ba'amidbar, in the wilderness, Ba'arava, in the plains, opposite Suf, between Paran and Tofel, and Lavan, and Chatzeros, and Dizahav. It's a very strange sentence, and Rashi explains that Moshe is beginning this book with a rebuke, with a criticism of the nation. He wants to remind them of the sins of the preceding 40 years. And he does it in a very fascinating way. He's ostensibly listing the place in which he's speaking, but it's actually the places in which the nation sinned over the preceding 40 years. And Rashi explains that Moshe did not want to explicitly spell out their wrongdoings. He simply listed the places in which they committed a misstep. So when it says Ba'amidbar, in the wilderness, that's a reference to Exodus chapter 16, where they said, if only we died in Egypt. And when it says the plains, that's a reference to Ba'amidbar chapter 25, when they sinned in the plains of Moab with the daughters of Moab. Opposite Suf, that's a reference to Exodus chapter 14, when they told Moshe before the sea split, are there insufficient graves in Egypt? You brought us here to die? And when it says the places of Paran and Tofel, that refers to when they complained about the manna, Numbers 21, and the sin of the spies, Numbers, Bamidbar 13, and Chatzeros, that's a reference to the rebellion of Korach, Bamidbar 16, and Dizahav, that's a reference to the sin of the golden calf, Exodus chapter 32. So the Torah uses 7 descriptive words that ostensibly are locations. This is in the first sentence of the book, but it actually refers to 7 different blunders that the nation committed over the preceding 40 years. And this is Moshe's rebuke to the nation. In one sentence, he's recapping 40 years of history, reminding the nation of their misdeeds, but doing so in a very hidden manner, in a subtle manner. He doesn't spell it out. He allows them to save face. He allows them to preserve their dignity, to maintain their honor. He just mentions the places. Don't forget about those sins and don't fall into the same traps in the future. Now, it is interesting. If you look at all the different incidents that Moshe references, it's not chronological. It jumps around. And that too is part of the message of Moshe. He's not trying to show a pattern of missteps. He's mentioning these isolated incidents. There's a difference between listing something in a chronological order versus listing a bunch of discrete, maybe even unconnected events. If someone does a bunch of random things, each one can be viewed as an aberration. If I list things in order, I'm trying to portray a pattern. Moshe is not trying to excoriate the nation. He's trying to provide productive criticism. You did this, you did that. It's not who you are. It's an aberration. But still be aware of your susceptibility to these sorts of misdeeds. Don't lose track of them. Don't forget about them. Stay vigilant for the future. Now, the last of these 7 places that hints to a sin of the nation is di zahav, which translates as sufficient or enough gold. And Rashi tells us, very interesting, that Moshe is rebuking, castigating the nation about the golden calf that they made because they had a lot of gold. And Rashi is really paraphrasing a very famous teaching in the Talmud. The Talmud, the book of Brachos, page 32a, is talking about this word, dizahav. And the Talmud explains that Moshe was making a very interesting argument. Moshe was telling God, Master of the world, the nation, they did the sin of the golden calf, but it's not their fault. Because you bestowed so much gold and so much silver upon them, you gave them so much gold until they said, die, it's enough. That's what caused the nation to do the golden calf. The golden calf is a rejection, a repudiation of God. In what circumstance can a person reject God? It's when they have a lot. They're awash in blessing. They become full of themselves. They're like invincible. They have everything going their way. That's when their mind slips. That's when they forget about God. Continues the Talmud. A lion does not roar if he's eating a basket of straw. He only roars when he has a basket of meat. This is a fascinating observation, maybe even accusation of Moshe. The sin of the golden calf, it's almost like it's not the nation's fault. It's almost like it's God's fault. You gave them so much gold, endless gold, infinite gold. And they got haughty, and they felt satiated and bold and aggressive, and they roared like a lion. They felt invincible. And that's what led to them rejecting, repudiating God. The abundance, the overabundance of goodness, the affluence, the wealth, the riches, the material success that God bestowed upon the people, that's what led them to forget about God and to seek alternatives to God. As an aside, this is a constant pattern throughout our history. When things are good, when we get rich, we get fat, we get acceptance, we make it big, we tend to drift away from faith. And when things are going poorly for us, when we're suffering, we're down out and out on our luck, we're marginalized, we're persecuted, we're hated, we're reviled, that's when we tend to cling to faith. The nation emerges from Egypt, and they have so much gold. They are drowning in gold. Who gave that to them? God. They have endless gold, infinite gold. Says Moshe, that's why they did the golden calf. The Talmud furnishes another analogy of a father who spoiled his son and positioned him to fail. A son who is bathed, who is anointed, who is well fed, and he has to drink, and he has a big bundle of money, and he's dropped in front of a brothel. Of course this kid's going to sin. You don't need to be a genius to figure out that a young man, he's pulsating with hormones, desired, he's well coiffed, he's bathed in cologne, slick hair, tons of money, dropped off at the entrance of the brothel, you don't need to be a genius to figure out what's going to happen. Who would you blame? Whose fault is this? Is it the kid's fault? Or is the dad who positioned his son to fail, is it the dad's fault? This is a shocking and fascinating angle to the sin of the golden calf. Moshe is almost accusing God of being responsible for this. The Talmud continues, there's a maxim, an aphorism, satiation of the stomach is almost a type of sin. When you eat and you're satiated and you're fattened, that's when you have a certain tendency, a certain proclivity to turn away from God. Jeshurun, another name for Israel. They grew fat and they rebelled. That's what Moshe is saying over here. In the golden calf, the nation rebelled. Sure. But why did they rebel? What caused it? What prompted it? Moshe pins the blame on God. You were too good to them. You gave them too much gold. You showered them with too much riches. And that's what led them astray. And the Talmud concludes that God agreed with Moshe's assessment. And that's why the prophet says, I gave them, meaning God is speaking here, an abundance of silver and gold, which they used for the idol. This is a very interesting subplot to the story of the golden calf, and it appears over here. This is, Moshe is always trying to argue in the defense of the nation. But Moshe doesn't just tell this to God. It's not just the exculpatory argument that Moshe, as the advocate of Israel, is making. He's telling this to the nation. He's listing all the places, 7 places, where the nation committed sins. And the last one, it's Dizahav. And what's that? That's the golden calf. It's the location that references the golden calf, but it's also the justification, if you will, or the argument for exculpation of the nation for the sin of the golden calf. He's telling the nation, you did the golden calf, but why did you do it? You were positioned to fail. There's a fascinating insight over here. The Midrash says that when God told Moshe to rebuke the nation before he passed, Moshe was resistant. Moshe bristled at the notion of rebuking the nation. Moshe rebuked the nation once before. Before Moshe struck the rock, he said, Shimu na hamorim, listen, hearken, O rebellious ones. That was a criticism. Moshe labeled the nation as rebellious ones. And what happened? It was a disaster, a catastrophe, a debacle, a fiasco. Moshe was condemned to perish, to die, before entering the land. Chastising the nation is a bad idea. Rebuking them, criticizing them, it's a bad idea. He didn't want to do it. But he does it. He does rebuke them. But he finds this very interesting way to rebuke them. The worst sin that the nation did is the golden calf. It's equivalent, the Talmud tells us, to committing adultery underneath the wedding canopy. The nation's still at Sinai. They just wedded themselves to God. And at Sinai, they opt for an idol? It's indefensible. And Moshe wants to mention this, but what does he do? He almost finds some way to release the nation from culpability. He tells them why you went astray, why you deviated. He's not blaming them, really. He's trying to find a way to understand what led them to this mistake. If you understand what led a person to a mistake, you now know how they can extricate themselves from that quagmire. When we think of criticism, we think of going to the guilty party and excoriating them for their behavior that's indefensible. We can accuse them of all their crimes and point out all their flaws and all their shortcomings and all the areas in which they botched it. Moshe is finding a different way to rebuke the nation, to be understanding of them, to be empathetic with them, to try to find out what led to their mistake, to not judge them, and to help them with a path out of the mistake that they made. He's not judging them. He's not looking down upon them. He's trying to understand them. He's trying to help them back on the right path. This is a very potent and productive way to help someone out of a bad situation. If you are judgmental, if you are unforgiving in your rebuke, if you are biting in your criticism, if you are unyielding, you may make a good argument, but it'll be likely rejected by the recipient of your critique. They don't want to hear that. They'll get defensive. They'll lash back. Oh, are you so righteous? Who are you to speak to me like that? You'll end up not accomplishing much and likely just increasing the enmity and the hatred that the person you tried to help has towards you. Moshe's telling them, he's showing them, yes, you made a terrible mistake, but where was that coming from? What led to it? He's trying to understand them. This form of critique is collaborative, is productive, and it can be uplifting. It can be transformative for the recipient of the critique. If you have a coach that wants you to flourish, wants you to achieve the absolute best that you can achieve, they could help you by pointing out maybe the flaws in your game, the gaps in your aptitude. You know that this person wants the best for you. This person's not judging you. They want to see you flourish. They're not blaming you. In that case, you will be receptive. And you're going to take to heart what they have to say. Moshe wants the nation to learn from this experience. So he finds a way to not blame the nation for the worst sin ever done. He finds a way to blame God. Now, of course, the nation is guilty. But there is some element of guilt that maybe they were set up poorly. Some element of the guilt that maybe is not their responsibility. And that's what Moshe is highlighting. And the nation says, oh, you're not accusing me? Let me hear what you have to say. Maybe I could be receptive to your message. In 2 verses, Moshe gives an entire speech in a gentle way, in a non-accusatory way. He's only subtly referencing the place where the nation blundered. The nation could be receptive to this criticism. In verse 3, we read Moshe's next message. It was on the 40th year. This is the last year in the wilderness. It's the 11th month. In a month and a few days, Moshe is going to pass. This is when Moshe spoke to the nation what God commanded him after he defeated Sichon, king of the Amorites, Og, king of the Bashanites. On the other side of the Jordan, in the land of Moab, Moshe began to clarify the Torah, saying, Moshe is going to clarify the Torah. Moshe is going to open up the well springs of Torah for them. The word be'er means both clarity, but also means well springs. And our sages tell us that Moshe is going to now open up the well springs, open up the portals of insight. He's going to explain the Torah to them in 70 languages from every angle, from every dimension. They're going to be exposed to a new level of Torah by Moshe. After Moshe struck Sichon and Og, he's going to clarify the Torah for them. But before Moshe clarifies the Torah, he begins to recount some of the events of the preceding 40 years in more detail. So we have the references to the sins with one word, and now he's going to spend some significant amount of time talking about several select events. And the first thing he mentions is the decision to appoint alternative judges. Verse 9, I said to you at that time, I cannot bear you myself. God has increased you, and behold you like the stars of the heaven. How can I bear you, your troubles, your burdens, your infighting? I can't do this myself. I need to have some helpers. Let's appoint some wise men, some insightful men, some experienced men, some discerning men from your tribes, and they will be heads. They will be leaders. At one point in time, Moshe was the sole leader. But remember when Jethro came and there was this whole hierarchical system, leaders of 1,000, leaders of 100, leaders of 50, leaders of 10. That's what Moshe is referencing over here. The appointment of additional leaders to aid Moshe in shepherding the nation. And then Moshe outlines the necessary qualities and virtues of a judge. They should be deliberate in judgment. They shouldn't rule impetuously. They shouldn't show favoritism in judgment. They should take every case seriously, regardless of the stakes. They shouldn't be fearful of any man. They should rule justly, regardless of the litigants. And the simpler cases should be resolved in the lower courts. You go to your leader of 10, and then you could push it up to the next higher court, leader of 50, leader of 100, leader of 1,000. And only the most difficult questions that the leader of 1,000 doesn't know, only those questions go to Moshe. That's the plan. And chapter 1, verse 14, the nation likes the plan. Vata'anu osi, you responded. This is a very good idea. Now Rashi tells us that this is actually a slip-up by the nation. They should have told Moshe, absolutely not. We don't like this idea at all. We don't want to learn from your lieutenants. We want to learn from you. Moshe, you're the one who went up to heaven, negotiated with the angels. You're the direct funnel of God. I don't want to have some knockoff version. I don't want to have some underling. I want to learn from you. You dedicated yourself for Torah more than anyone else. You're the one I want to study from. That's what they should have said. But they were happy. And Rashi tells us that the real reason why they were happy is because they thought that maybe, Moshe's too reliant. He's too truthful. There's no way to trick him. But he's going to appoint leaders of 10 and leaders of 50 and 100 and 1,000. Leaders of 10 means every 10th person is a leader. I could find a way to trick them. I could maybe bribe them. I could hoodwink them. They wanted to unburden themselves from the strict scrutiny and uncompromising truthfulness of Moshe. They didn't want to hear from Moshe. That's the first thing that Moshe mentions at length in the Parsha, the appointment of alternative judges. And it's not clear why is this the beginning of Moshe's speech. He's going to clarify the Torah for us. After he destroyed Sichon and Og, he's going to give us the inside of Torah, the well springs of Torah. But first, let's talk about the appointment of judges. Why is it so important that this be told at length? Moshe wasn't able to lead the nation himself. He had to appoint other leaders to help him steward the nation. It's not immediately clear why this is something which is told to us at length. Following the retelling of the appointment of judges, Moshe retells a second story. The story of the dispatching of the spies to scout the land. He tells them, you approach me. Let's send men to explore the land. Let's find the vulnerabilities, the weaknesses of the Canaanites. So Moshe agreed, and he selected 12 men, one from every tribe. We know the story, Parsha Shlach. And they explored the land, and they came back with a report. And their report was, the land is very good. Moshe, of course, only mentions the part of the report said by Joshua and Caleb. Continues Moshe, but you refused to ascend. The report of the spies was very good. It's a good land. But you, the nation, you cowered in fear. And Moshe then recounts the aftermath of the sin of the spies. You went to your tents and you started lamenting the fact, oh, God hates us. He wants us to be destroyed. They have these massive fortified cities and they have the sons of the giants. We're all going to be destroyed and let's go back to Egypt. And I said to you, don't be fearful of them. What are you worried about them? God's going to help you. He's going to wage the war. We just left Egypt, right? Just as he destroyed Egypt, he's going to destroy the Canaanites. You saw what God did for you in Egypt. He took you out. He's caring for you like a parent cares for a child. And notwithstanding everything that God did for you, on your behalf, you still don't believe in him. There's the pillar of cloud and the pillar of fire. You're enshrouded, enveloped, cocooned, protected at all times. Why don't you trust in God? Why are you worried about the Canaanites? And Moshe recounts the aftermath, the consequences of the sin of the spies. None of the people of this generation, with the exception of Joshua and Caleb, none of them will enter the land. The entire generation is going to pass, and only their descendants will enter the land. And then Moshe tells of the defiant travelers. There were some people, a cohort, who were insistent on entering the land. They wanted to repent for the sin of the spies. Oh, we were scared initially because the people in Canaan are so fearsome. We'll defiantly enter the land. We'll risk it all. Moshe tries to stop them. They went nonetheless and were slaughtered. That's the end of chapter 1 of our book. So if you look at chapter 1, it's 2 verses of criticism, veiled criticism, subtle criticism, hints at places where the nation sinned, and it's moderated by the fact that Moshe is even trying to find some sort of exculpation for the nation. They had a lot of gold, after all. Who gave them the gold? Who's to blame? Moshe spends just a few words to subtly remind the nation of their past misdeeds. And then Moshe says, it was the 40th year, it was the 11th month, and so on. After the destruction of Sichon and Og, he wants to explain the Torah. He wants to clarify the Torah. He wants to open up the well springs of Torah. But first, Moshe, in great detail, I counted, it's 38 verses. He retells 2 major events. The nation's desire to have other leaders, other judges, aside from Moshe, the appointment of the judges, and the sin of the spies, the ill-fated decision to explore the land, the report that they brought back, the nation's response to the report, and the disastrous outcome of that. And it's kind of a mystery. Why does Moshe begin the book in such a fashion? Why is Moshe specifically highlighting these 2 events and telling these 2 events over in great detail? You imagine that, one of the words that Moshe mentioned, chatzeros, that's a reference to the sin of Korach. The story of Korach could have been told over in great detail. He for some of the misdeeds of the nation, some of the mistakes of the nation, he gives only one word. The revulsion with the manna, the golden calf, it's one word. But the appointment of the judges and the sin of the spies, that's 38 verses. There's some reason why Moshe, in the beginning of the book, in the beginning of his final message to the nation, in the beginning of his plan to clarify the Torah, after the conquest of Sichon and Og, he has to spend 38 verses detailing specifically the nation's interest in replacing Moshe as the sole leader, appointing alternative judges, and the events of the spies and its aftermath. Now, the rest of the Parsha details some of the interactions that the nation had with various other nations on the east side of the Jordan. So it begins with the nation's encounter with Edom. Edom, of course, is from Esav. They had to go around the mountain of Seir, the mountain of Edom. We cannot wage war with Edom. They live in Seir. We cannot provoke them. We cannot even take a single footfall in their land. Why? Because the mountain of Seir, it's given to Esav. It's his inheritance. And if they don't let us pass through, we cannot pass through. And if we buy food or water, we got to pay top dollar. We got to go around. We must circumvent the land of Edom. That's detailed in the beginning of chapter 2. Okay, following Edom, we have another cousin of ours, the Moabites. So Edom comes from Esav, the brother of Jacob. We have other cousins from the family of Lot. You recall, of course, Lot had an ignominious, consanguineous couple of nights in the cave with his daughters, and that produced the bastards of Ammon and Moab. So there's two nations, the Ammonites and the Moabites. And we're told about the nation's encounter with these two Lot descendant nations. In verse 9 of chapter 2, Moshe recounts, God told him you cannot harass the Moabites. You cannot wage war with them. Just as they gave the mountain of Seir to Esav, the land of the Moabites, Moab, it's given to the descendants of Lot. You got to find a different pathway to the land. What about the Ammonites, the other nation from Lot? Just as we cannot wage war against the Moabites, chapter 2, verse 19, do not harass the Ammonites. Do not provoke war with them. Just as I gave the land of the Moabites to the descendants of Lot, I'm giving the land of the Ammonites to the other descendants of Lot. So we start off chapter 2, and there's three nations that are untouchable. We have Edom from Esav, Ammon and Moab from Lot. But not everyone is untouchable. Verse 24, cross over the river Arnon. I'm going to deliver to you Sichon, king of Heshbon, the Amorite. Don't get these confused. There's the Ammonite and the Amorite. It's confusing. There's the state of Georgia and there's the country of Georgia. Different places, different people. The king of the Amorites, Sichon, Melech Heshbon, king of Heshbon, he is fair game. Occupy his land. Provoke him into war. You're going to develop a reputation here. I will put the dread and the fear of all the peoples. They're going to tremble and quiver and quake when they hear your name mentioned. Sichon, the mighty Sichon, king of Heshbon, the Amorite, he's going to crumble before you. He's a powerful nation. He doesn't even need Og. We'll get to Og in a second. Now Moshe, before he wages war with Sichon, he sends an overture of peace. God told him to make war. He says, first we have to offer peace. Even though God instructed to make war, it's always appropriate to pursue peace, first of all. So Moshe sends a message to Sichon. Let us pass through your land. I'll stay in the roads. I won't deviate. Not to the right and not to the left. And I'll pay for what I eat, for what I drink. Just let me pass through. I want the land of Canaan. I won't attack you. But Sichon did not allow us to pass through his land. God hardened Sichon's spirit, stiffened his heart. He got the Pharaoh treatment. In order that he be delivered in your hand like this very day. Sichon comes out to war, Moshe recounts. And God delivered him to us. We struck him and his sons and his entire nation. We captured his cities. We devastated them. We left nothing behind. Sichon was roundly defeated. That's the end of chapter 2. Chapter 3 begins with Sichon's brother, Og, or Og. Yeah, that's right. Sichon and Og were brothers. And they had some very interesting, ethereal pedigree. These were descendants of the fallen angels of Genesis? Remember that story? Well, tell us more about the fallen angels. I don't know anything about it. Don't email me, rabbi@gmail.com. It's too mysterious. But Hasidus tell us, Sichon and Og, they were giants. Why were they giants? Because they had some non-human pedigree. They descended from the fallen angels of Genesis. Chapter 3, verse 2, Moshe recounts that God told him to not be scared of Og. Moshe wasn't scared of Sichon, but he was scared of Og. And Rashi tells us because Og had some merits. Og was helpful to Abraham. What was Og helpful to Abraham? Chapter 14 of Genesis, Lot was kidnapped. And the refugee informed Abraham about his brother-in-law slash nephew, Lot, who was kidnapped. Who's this refugee? Who's this survivor that informed Abraham about this bit of information? That is Og, our sages tell us. And he was a survivor. He was a refugee from the flood, according to one version of the events. When the flood happened, Og, he hustled to the land of Israel. The land of Israel did not flood with the flood, and that's how he survived. According to a second, way more dramatic version of the events, Og survived by clinging onto the outside of the ark. He was a clever one, a dexterous one, a wizard, the Wizard of Og. He was hanging on for dear life on the outside of the ark. And he survived. He's the survivor. He's the refugee. He comes to Abraham, tells him, Lot was kidnapped. Now Rashi there tells us he had his eyes on Sarah. He says, you know what? I'll tell Abraham. Abraham will go pursue them, try to be the hero. He'll be slaughtered. I'll marry Sarah. That was his plan. Of course, Abraham won the war. But regardless, Moshe is fearful. Og has some merits. Maybe I won't be able to defeat him. God tells Moshe, don't worry. I will deliver Og and his entire nation to you and all of his land to you. You'll do to him like he did to his brother, Sichon. And indeed, God delivered Og into our hands, Moshe tells the nation, and we struck him, and there were no survivors. We conquered all of his land and all of his cities and all the massive fortified strongholds. These two empires, these two twin towers, these two formidable nations, Sichon and Og, are no longer. Moshe tells the nation, these lands were settled by the Reubenites, the Gadites, and half of the tribe of Manasseh, as we mentioned in last week's Parsha. And after the conquest of these empires, Moshe told Joshua, you witnessed what God did to these great kings. That's exactly how God will destroy the many other kings that you are going to encounter once you cross over the Jordan. Do not be fearful of them, because it is God who is waging war on your behalf. That's the Parsha. Let's go backstage. I have to say that there are 54 Parshios in the Torah, and the Parsha that I always struggle the most with is Parsha's Devarim. And I think I may have cracked the code. Let's go backstage. You could divide the Parsha really into two parts. We have a very truncated speech. It's 2 verses. And it's not even using full sentences. It's hints. Moshe is chiding the nation in a very gentle way, in a way that allows them to save face, to preserve their honor. He's just listing all the different places where the nation stumbled. 2 verses. And then in verse 3, we say, okay, it was the 40th year, it was the 11th month. Moshe is going to explain to them the Torah after the defeat, the conquest of Sichon and Og. He's going to clarify the Torah. He's going to open up those well springs of Torah. He's going to give us stunning and scintillating clarity of Torah, as if in 70 languages. Now, we're not sure where that clarity is coming from. We haven't really heard much clarity. Moshe is still in the retrospective mode. He's talking about the past. And he's going off on a tangent. He has 38 verses about the nation wanting judges, not subsisting with Moshe alone, and the nation requesting spies, go scout the land, and the disastrous after effects of that. And then chapters 2 and 3 detail the encounters with some of the nations that they met. We have Edom, Esav, untouchable. Ammon and Moab from Lot, untouchable. We got to tread carefully around these three. But the other two, the superpowers, Sichon and Og, these can be smitten. And that's indeed what happened. Now, perhaps we recall there were some other nations, or at least one other nation, on the other side of the Jordan. It was just recently we read about the war against Midian. You remember Parsha's Pinchas and last week's Parsha? God told Moshe, go wage war against Midian and then you'll pass. That's not mentioned in our Parsha. It mentions Edom, Esav, 2 from Lot, Ammon and Moab, and then Sichon, king of the Amorites, and Og Melech HaBashan, Og, king of the Bashanites. What about Midian? Midian is omitted. Why is Moshe highlighting specifically the wars against Sichon and Og and omitting the other war that was also as lopsided, the war against Midian? Now, it's interesting, the book, or the Parsha, begins with Sichon and Og, and it ends with Sichon and Og. Verse 4 of the Parsha, Moshe is going to clarify the Torah. He's going to open up those wellsprings of Torah. He's going to give us the insight into Torah, 70 languages, the absolute paramount clarity. But in verse 4, it says very carefully that this was after the conquest of Sichon and Og. That's when Moshe was going to clarify the Torah. And then it goes into these tangents, these segues about the appointment of judges and the episode of the spies. So I was always a bit flummoxed by the Parsha. It's hard to see the connective tissue, the continuity, the flow of the Parsha. I want to suggest an idea. I saw a fascinating comment from the Hasidic masters. They're talking about verse 4. Verse 4 of the Parsha, it tells us that after Moshe struck, defeated Sichon, king of the Amorites, who lives in Heshbon, and Og, king of the Bashanites, who dwells in Ashtaros Bedrei, then Moshe began to explain the Torah. The Torah is linking Moshe's plan to clarify Torah with the defeat of Sichon and Og. And the Hasidic masters tell us something very interesting. There was no way to clarify Torah so long as Sichon and Og were around. When we read about personalities and nations in the Torah, these are not just, ordinary people, ordinary nations. These all have spiritual underpinnings. And the Hasidic masters say that there's two forces represented by Sichon and Og, two spiritual forces that were thwarting the nation and were preventing them from experiencing Torah on a deep level. Moshe wants to clarify the Torah. He wants to open up the wellsprings of Torah for the nation. He wants to give him insight and clarity and depth and profound understanding, as if in 70 languages. He wants to do that, but he cannot do it so long as Sichon and Og are present. These two are spiritual obstacles, spiritual foils that prevent the clarification of Torah. But after Sichon and Og are defeated, then Moshe can begin to clarify the Torah. And our sages revealed to us more that these two nations, Sichon and Og, they represent two different types of spiritual corruption. The word cheshbon, that's where Sichon lived. The word cheshbon means calculation. There are bad calculations someone could have in their head. And to thwart that, we have the tefillin on the head. And Sichon represents bad calculations of the head. And Og, who lives be'edrei, the word be'edrei, the Talmud tells us, means on the arm. That corresponds to corruption, not of the mind, of the intellect, but of the arm, of the heart, of the body, of action. And that is thwarted by the tefillin on the arm. That's what the Hasidic masters tell us. Now we know, Talmud tells us, that Sichon and Og descend from fallen angels. There's immense spiritual power within them, but it's gone askew. It's gone awry. There's corruption here. And so long as that corruption is present in the world, Moshe cannot clarify the Torah. Once Sichon and Og are defeated, once this corruption has been cleansed, has been removed, Moshe is able to embark on his goal of clarifying the Torah. And Sichon, that's the corruption of the mind, and that's symbolized by, or that's countered by the tefillin of the head, and Og, it corresponds to the corruption that can be fixed, that can be remedied by the tefillin of the arm. Okay. I know we're deep into this podcast, and I'm a little worried that what I'm going to say is a little bit nuanced. So I may lose the audience. Whoever's still with us, that's okay. I'm just so excited because I always felt like I was flummoxed by the Parsha. I think there's an approach here. The tefillin of the arm and the tefillin of the head, if you open them up, you'll find scrolls. And in those scrolls, you'll find words from the Torah, 4 different paragraphs from the Torah. If you look very closely, the tefillin of the head has 4 different compartments. In each compartment, there's a scroll. In the tefillin of the arm, it's only 1 compartment. Now, if you open up all the scrolls, they have the exact same words, the exact same paragraphs. But there's a difference. The tefillin of the head has 4 separate compartments, and the one on the arm has only 1. Our sages tell us that the tefillin of the head corresponds to the first 4 books of the Torah. And the tefillin of the arm is the 5th book, where the Torah is retold, is the book of Devarim, the repetition of the Torah done by Moshe. That corresponds to the tefillin of the arm. So this speech that Moshe has given us is like the tefillin of the arm. Now again, I want to repeat myself because I want to make this clear, and you might need to listen to this twice just to get the calculation here. If Sichon is a force, a noxious spiritual force that corrupts the brain and is affected, or is countered by the tefillin of the head, and Og corresponds to corruption of the body, and that is countered by the tefillin of the arm, and the first 5 books of the Torah correspond to the tefillin of the head, and the last book of the Torah corresponds to the tefillin of the arm, that means that the speech of Moshe is almost directed to counter Og. You have to trust me on that. Or you have to listen to this again, write it down. So here's what I want to propose. Something very profound. To have the full suite, the full complement of Torah, you need to have both tefillins. You have to have the one on your head and the one on your arm. It's not enough to have insight in your head. If someone has insight in their head, it doesn't translate to their body. What do we call that? We call that Esav. Right? Esav is the one whose head was buried in the cave of the patriarchs. His head was full of Torah, full of insight, full of understanding, full of Torah, but it wasn't connected to his body. It didn't penetrate his heart. So his head is worthy of being buried amongst the forefathers, his head alone. What Moshe is doing in this book is he's taking all of Torah in the preceding 4 books and he's bringing it down to us. He's teaching us how to actualize it. He's repeating in a way that we're going to know exactly what to do. He's giving us the way to implement all the divine insight. It's been almost a running theme since the introduction of Moshe at the beginning of the book of Exodus that the nation needs to be upgraded in their faith. And in their faith, it's really on 2 levels. Belief in God, faith in God, and belief in Moshe. Moshe, of course, is the prophet. He's the spokesman of God. He's the mouthpiece of God. So at the burning bush, Moshe is objecting to go save the nation. And he tells God that they're not going to believe in you. They're going to say, well, which name appeared to you? They're going to be resistant to faith in God. That's chapter 3, verse 13 of Exodus. In addition, Moshe tells God, they won't believe in me. There's a concern. The nation's not believing in God, almost like the tefillin of the head, and not believe Moshe, like the tefillin of the arm. Now, the entire process of the Exodus is developing and reinforcing and deepening the nation's faith in God and in Moshe. Even Pharaoh becomes a believer. Chapter 9, verse 27 of Exodus, Hashem HaTzadik, God is the righteous one, and me and my nation are the wicked ones. That's Pharaoh speaking. Chapter 11, verse 3, Gam Ha'ish Moshe, the man Moshe, was great in the eyes of Egypt, in the eyes of Pharaoh and his nation. Everyone is being upgraded in their faith in God, their faith in Moshe. After the splitting of the sea, chapter 14, verse 31, the nation saw what happened. They saw what God did to Egypt. Vayiru ha'ames Hashem, the nation feared God. Vaya'aminu b'Hashem, they had faith in God. Ubim Moshe avdo, and in Moshe his servant. Faith in God, faith in Moshe. Insight from the divine, implementation directives from Moshe. By the sign of Revelation, chapter 19, verse 9, the plan of Sinai was to clinch the faith in God and in Moshe. Moshe is told that after Sinai, they will believe in God, v'gam b'cha ya'aminu, and also in you they will believe. If someone just believes in God but doesn't have Torah, doesn't have the prophecy, they're not going to have the full suite. To have Torah and to have it transform you, you need faith in God and faith in Moshe. You have to realize that the prophet, the deliverer of Torah, the mouthpiece, the scribe of God, is also legit. Once you have both of these elements of faith, the path to Torah, even the highest level of Torah, the clarity of Torah, is now open. Sichon and Og, they're people, they're nations, but they represent ideologies. They're the twin towers of heresy. And we counter them with the 2 tefillins. There is the heresy against God, the tefillin of the head. Sichon is the king of Cheshbon. Cheshbon means calculation or calculus. This is resistance to faith in God. I was thinking that in Ecclesiastes chapter 7, verse 29, we read a verse. God made man straight, but they sought cheshbonos rabim. They sought lots of calculations. The same word. He's the king of Cheshbon. The clarity of God was muddled with calculations. With simple logic, there's no room for faithlessness in God. Sichon represents this foil to faith in God. Sichon, king of Cheshbon. Now Moshe is not scared of Sichon. He is fearful of Og. There's something about Og that's the foil of Moshe. That's the thwarting or the resisting of faith in Moshe. You need to clear away both of these in order to have full clarity in Torah. And while it's true, the nation believed in God and they believed in Moshe, but not 1,000,000% quite yet. And Moshe spends a lot of time detailing the two episodes that most demonstrate that there was a lack of complete faith in God and in Moshe. The nation was resistant to Moshe. They wanted other judges. Moshe, you're great, but give us people that we can manipulate. They wanted alternatives to Moshe. They didn't buy into Moshe 100%. They should have said, Moshe, no, we want from you directly. They were very happy to have alternative judges, to have lieutenants. So the episode of the judges shows that the spirit of Og maintained a foothold within them. They want lieutenants. They don't want just Moshe. In the episode of the spies, they are rejecting God. Moshe tells them explicitly, you're not accepting God. And that's why you're refusing to enter the land. That's the other poison. The spirit of Sichon still maintained a beachhead in their hearts. So Moshe, he's beginning his message. And he wants to open up for them new vistas of insight, new vistas of understanding, of connection, of deepening the connection with God and his Torah. The well springs he wants to unveil for them. But so long as they were stricken by the maladies of Sichon and Og, so long as they were rejecting Moshe and the Almighty, so long as they could say, we want other judges, not you. We don't want to enter the land. We reject God. There are blockages, the blockage of Sichon, the blockage of Og. It was only after the defeat of these two that the nation was ready. So the Torah details, after the defeat of Sichon and Og, you need to defeat them, as evidenced by the fact that the spirit of Sichon and the spirit of Og still reigned over the nation. They wanted alternatives to Moshe. They wanted other judges. They didn't fully accept the faith in God. They cowered with the message, with the report of the spies. But after these two blockages were removed, the path to total clarity of Torah was opened. I think there's a very profound insight for us. In order for us to have the experience of Torah, where it really impacts us, not just on one level, but on all levels, it envelops us entirely. It's like a wellspring that is unbridled. We have to overcome two barriers. Barriers represented by two teams, Sichon and Og. Barriers manifested by the nation in these two episodes. The episode of the nation seeking alternatives to Moshe, and the episode of the nation rejecting God's great gift of the land, the good land, the land flowing with milk and honey. Torah is indeed transformative. And we're not done with Torah. Moshe is going to reveal to them the beauty of Torah, the mastery of Torah, the well springs of Torah, the great insight of Torah, 70 language clarity. To do that, you have to overcome two humps. The tendency to reject God, the Sichon melody, and the tendency to reject Moshe, the Og melody. We must have total surrender to God. And we have to embrace the implementation as directed to us by Moshe. And for us to achieve our destiny and to have clarity in Torah, it's like two stages represented by the tefillin. Tefillin on the head, tefillin on the arm. Divine insight, divine understanding, and then the transmission of that to ourselves. The implementation of that. The actualization of that. If the Torah remains in our head and does not come all the way down to our body, into our behavior, into our day-to-day lives, we are still stricken by the brother Og. Two forces we must overcome. Once they are defeated, the path is clear. It's a holistic view in the entire Parsha. We have 2 verses, Moshe's critique. Now he's moving on to the clarity of Torah. And it's conditioned, Moshe tells us, on the defeat of Sichon and Og. And I will prove to you, you weren't quite ready. So long as Sichon and Og were around, so long as these spiritual forces were present in the world before they were defeated, the nation was capable of saying, we want alternatives to Moshe. Give us a lieutenant, a judge that we can bribe. They were trying to unshackle themselves, as it were, from Moshe. Until Sichon and Og were defeated, it was possible for them to hear the message of the spies and say, we don't want the land. It's possible for them to reject the goodness of God. But with the defeat of Sichon and Og, with both of the tefillin superpowers installed, nothing can stop us. I hope that was clear. This was an idea that this was a parsha that I always struggle with. And I think I may have cracked the code, but it's still new. This is what I thought of today. I'm working on the parsha for a long time. This is the 10th year of the Parsha podcast. But this is at least the structure of the Parsha as I see it. I would love to hear your feedback. Let me know. This could always be a version 1. It could be a version 1. We could update it. We could amend it. That's how it works the Parsha podcast. I'm always receptive and very interested in your feedback, in your questions, in your comments. I hope you have a wonderful day and a phenomenal rest of your week. And of course, a powerful and productive and meaningful and edifying and quiescent Shabbos upcoming. And please, God, with the help of the Almighty, we'll talk again next week. And as always, the email address is rabbiwolbe@gmail.com.